All right, I am going to just do a little bit of housekeeping here at the top. Um, we are going to host an in-person succession planning workshop at the Dallas Pool Spa Patio Expo coming up. It's on November 11th from 1 to 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. No, 4 o'clock. Sorry. um, and so for all of you who have been coming to these seminars, I'd like to offer you guys a little discount for, attending these. The discount code is loyalty. I dropped the link to sign up for that in the chat. Um, and yeah, if you have any questions about that, feel free to email me, but I'm hoping that I can see some of you there in person. It's going to be hosted by Regenerists, which if you remember, Ellie Hansen, I'm sorry, was on not the podcast, but the podcast and the webinar earlier this year. And she had a really great insight into small business owners. And they help people work through transitions all the time. Um, so yeah, we've got that coming up. Um, all right, well, welcome, Brian and Jeff. Thank you for being panelists on our webinar today. For those of you who don't know Brian or Jeff, Brian is the former co-owner of Aquaquip, and they had several locations in the Seattle area. And then Jeff Bailey is the former owner of Spring Dance Hot Tubs, and they had several locations across New Jersey and Pennsylvania. So thanks so much for coming on today, guys. I appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here. Hi, Jeff. Good to see you, buddy.
Uh-oh. All right, well, we'll give Jeff a second to figure that out.
He hasn't even started to talk and you cut the mic off.
I know, yeah. He's not on mute, so he's just got to get his mic turned on his
mechanical malfunction.
Yeah. And I should say, so Jeff was the former co-host of the Spa Retailer podcast back in the day. We did that for, I don't know, about a year or so. He was my co-host, which was really fun. Well, while Jeff figures that out, Brian, let's give people a little bit of your background because I mean, not only have you gone through this latest transaction of selling your business to Leslie's, you also kind of went through some other transitions in between there. You took over your parents' business and then you actually merged with another business before you kind of became the bigger Aquaquip.
Yeah, that's a mouthful. And I, for the sake of trying to be efficient in time, I was, my parents owned the business. I joined my dad in the late 70s. It worked with my father. He passed away in the 90s. In the late 90s, I joined with a company owned by Eric and Kathleen Carlson. They had 3 stores in a southern edge of our market. We had 5 stores. At that point, it was my mother and I had 5 stores. And we were just getting into really, by then we were well into the hot tub business, but our roots were pool service, pool supplies in the Pacific Northwest for what pool supplies are. And then ran the business with the Carlsons from 1998 until we sold the business and the buyer was Leslie's in 2019. So that was sort of the equity journey. I started the journey, so that's my back. That's just the lead up to what got us to when the phone rang and the opportunity presented itself. Go ahead. I'll let Jeff catch up if that's what you want to do, Megan.
Yeah. Jeff, are you oh no, still no audio for Jeff. I'm sorry. I wish I had a way to help you troubleshoot, but if you need to sign off and get back on, go ahead.
Call in on your phone.
Yeah, you could do that too, if you wanted to call in on your phone.
Yeah.
See your face. Either way, whatever.
Okay, so someone would ask me, when did I decide to seek an outside buyer? And I guess I would go, and again, when Jeff's ready to talk, I'll stop. But I'll go way back probably 20 years ago, when 20 years before I sold the business, when my father was still alive, and I wanted to professionalize our team. And so in the late 90s, mid 90s, we brought in a CPA to run our finance side of the business, not instead of me, but to sort of make sure that we were running the business crisply financially. And that really, we built the business and my leadership team the same way over the 30 some odd years. Is I had a team in place, and part of that was selfish because I didn't want to have to do everything, and part of that was because I wasn't really good at everything, and part of that was I knew that I wasn't going to live forever, and whatever my ultimate exit was going to be needed to sort of be without me being vital of the day to day of the business. So, I mean, that's sort of so how we built the team over the years. And we always sort of built the team not knowing what an exit would look like, but I knew that there could, my vacations went from 3 days to a week to 2 weeks to almost, I think, even once 3 weeks, and well beyond that. And then, so that's kind of how we in part, readied the business for sale without really saying, okay, we're going to go find a buyer. That is, I think you just got to have done that before you may be that overly attractive to a buyer. So depends on the buyer. So Jeff, can you talk yet? That's no.
And if you need me to send you, Jeff, if you need me to send you call-in information, I could do that. I can do that too. I'll see if I can get that for you to send over.
So if I could just build on that for a second, is the other thing before you start identifying who your prospective buyer could be, and that would include people that are related party inside the business, family members or key employees, and or outside buyers. And there's either a financial buyer, someone that wants to buy your business and maybe run it or grow it. And then there's strategic buyers that sort of look at your business, your yin fits their yang. This sort of 1 + 1 = 3. And the more you can position your business to make that multiple of 1 + 1 = 3, means your business is more valuable to an outside buyer. But again, is it a related party, inside family member? Do they have money? Are you going to finance it? Outside buyer, do they have money? Are they going to finance it? Are you going to do an earn out and stay in the business? There's a myriad of questions that I would ask before I could answer how did I position the business to go out and seek the outside buyer. And I didn't. What I did was I did a bunch of homework and just sort of built the business as though the opportunity would present itself. And there was a voicemail from Director of Acquisitions from Leslie. So really all I did with regards to finding an outside buyer was return the call.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Jeff, are you with us?
Think so. Can you hear me now?
I like it.
There we go. Yeah. Now we got two Jeffs. We got you in like surround sound.
Wow.
But that's fine. But that's fine.
It's his best profile right there.
Before we move on to Jeff, I do just want to say, if you guys have any questions throughout this, go ahead and drop those into the Q&A for sure, and I will monitor that as we go. So drop those in there as along the way. Well, we've gotten a little bit of Brian's background. So Jeff, likewise, you bought Spring Dance hot tubs from your partner before you then also sold it to Leslie's. And even though you guys both sold to Leslie's, I will say this is not a primer on how to sell your business to Leslie's. I don't think that's that's not what we're doing here. It just happened to be the same buyer for these two. But yeah, what was that journey like for you, Jeff?
I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit, and in the 90s, I was involved with a business called ServPro, which does the fire damage, water damage restoration. Sure. So I did that for almost 10 years. And then during that time, I bought a hot tub from a guy who was my former partner, Dan Stein. And when I bought that hot tub from him, Years later, we hadn't seen each other in years. We met a mutual friend. I was getting insurance for a new venture, and he said, I asked how Dan was doing, and he said, oh, he opened a hot tub store. And so I went up to check out the hot tubs. And at the time, he was a Sundance and a hot spring dealer. And I was blown away at the products. And then he said, hey, I need some help. This business is really taken off. And so I did it under the agreement that if we expanded, I could be part of an expansion. So that's how it kind of evolved into me being an owner. We were able to get into the New Jersey market and open up our own store there that we then grew with other stores that we were opening in Pennsylvania.
I feel like you had barely completed the acquisition when then I got the news that you had turned around and sold it. Um, which, that's the way that these things kind of go sometimes. But I mean, how did that come about? I mean, how were you, how did you know you were ready to take that step?
I didn't, but I had always surrounded myself with bright people like Brian and several people that I was able to talk with because, quite frankly, I thought, I purchased the business 3 years prior. And I remember driving into work one Saturday morning, I think it was, and Brian had said, call me Saturday morning. I have some time. And we chatted. And that's when he told me he had sold the business to Leslie's. And while I was so happy for him, I was sad for myself because I thought, oh, I just bought this. I've got to stay in this for a long time. And the way it worked out was really remarkable because it was just a completely different approach than you would have selling to family or selling to an employee. It just was completely different. You were dealing with a company that had the means to, give you 90% of the funding upfront, and hold back which is typical in any purchase business, was very fair. So yeah, it all happened very quickly. And there was a few things people had said. I remember Sue Rogers had said, "You don't pick the day you sell your business; it picks you." And that was where I realized, hey, this is important. So I really, really just stepped back and said, what can I do over the next 10 years? That could top this, and it was very difficult that I could do that. Um,
Yeah.
so um, so I escaped the hot tub.
Yeah. Um, I didn't realize, Brian, until you were interviewed in a recent article in the magazine. As we've been going through this, as we've been going through this series, we've talked about all the different ways that you can sell a business. Like Jeff mentioned, you selling to family, selling to an employee. Um, you had actually looked at a lot of those. Well, and at ESOP, that's the other one we talked a lot about. You had looked at those options, at all of those options kind of in depth before you found an outside buyer. So I'm kind of curious, um, where did you start as far as how you thought you were going to, transition your business to where you actually ended up?
Very differently. And uh, Jeff alluded to the type of buyer. There's different types of buyers out there. It so happened that our buyer, it they didn't on a longer term basis, they didn't see any value in us being there, and there was no dollars associated with us being there, and so it was an exit. Uh, and there's going to be buyers out there that it's not going to be as clean of an exit. Um, and it depends also, I think, on on hindsight, what do you want after you sell your business 5-10 years out? What's the leg? Yeah, you want the dough, and that's really, yeah. And if that's really primary to you, then what I'm about to say really then doesn't matter. But what's the legacy of your business that you want to see out there when 5 years, 10 years down the road, and you drive by one of your former stores? What's the feeling in your stomach? And I think it would be a better feeling in your stomach if it was a related party transaction. because the legacy got to live on as opposed to just kind of got picked up and plunked into a different world.
Sure.
Uh, so, um, so I mean, I played out every related party transaction, and quite honestly, it ate up 20 years. And by the time I really felt like we had come upon, we'd played out offspring. The Carlsons had two very competent boys. I had two very capable daughters, and it took us, and then a son-in-law on my part, and it took us a good 15, 20 years to just work through almost the kid thing to see if they're that, because it's got to work for all parties, and they have to be capable and competent. And really, you also have to be willing to carry some of the risk long term, i.e., the financing or whatever. But it's really, so we played that out, and it took a lot of time. And then sort of the next period of time was looking at key employees. And by the time we really got serious about it, our runway was too short because a lot of internal key employee transactions are sort of funded on future upside, right? New profit dollars, right? And that takes time. Had we known COVID was on the horizon, oh my God, but
would have taken a little less time.
Yeah, and guess what? That's when Jeff sold at the top of that.
Good for you, Jeff.
Top of that. But my point with that was I forgot my point.
Yeah, you kind of ran out of time.
No, and so our runway was too short. These two key employees would have been incredible, and really, I saw them buying out my partner's equity, and then I figured from there we'd figure it out. And the problem is I consumed too much time getting to that conversation, because my preferred exit would have been an internal / related party transaction. And then and so I don't know how Jeff would, what he would say about that.
Yeah, well, it was really different for you, Jeff. I mean, we did have a question. I mean, how did you get hooked up with Leslie's, Jeff? Did you get a voicemail that you answered like Brian did, or were there some kind of back and forth before that, or what?
It was more of a emotional decision, in the sense that anybody who has a small business knows this. But when I came home to my granddaughter's first birthday party, and as I was walking up the path to the house, I realized I was late. And it flashed me back 30 years to my daughter's birthday party that I was late to because I was working, and I just had enough. And I was talking on the phone with Joe Mahoney, and he said, let me call those guys over there at Leslie's and see if they're interested. And I said, I'd love that. And in fact, let me follow up with a phone call too. So he put me in touch with them. It took a few months before we started seriously talking, but my decision was strictly, I was fried. I was burnt, and this seemed like an option at the time. However, they had also picked the Philadelphia market to start selling hot tubs out of their Leslie's locations at the time. So that was another thing that I thought, well, they would not be interested even a little bit in me. And I think, Brian, didn't you have something to do with that?
No, the hot tubs in the Philly market.
No.
Not really. We can talk offline on that, but not really. Other than that, it was Dreammaker product, right? But
yes.
And now that who knows where that world is now? But
it was
something, Jeff. In terms of how we became acquainted with the opportunity, Jeff and I are similar in that we're networkers. We have a lot of relationships in this industry, and Jeff's a master at keeping them going. Networkers both in the industry or supplier centric, be it a Watkins or a Jacuzzi or whatever set of dealers that you really share all with, Gemini Group being something along that line. You learned about your business. You learned how to enhance your business to add enterprise value and you knew what was going on in other markets and what and you stayed in tune with other transactions to the best that anybody in a confidentiality agreement could share with you. And so it wasn't like all new for you. We both become sort of students of this before these opportunities both presented themselves.
Yeah.
Don't you agree with that, Jeff?
I do. And then you know, we were just a small part of something huge that was going on in the country, which was acquisitions, right? Brian, I mean, the more I got talking to lawyers and different people, the law firm here in Doylestown where I live, they actually were adding to their staff. Like they were adding staff strictly for acquisition. So it was on fire for a few years. So that was kind of exciting. I mean,
Yeah. There's been a lot of, I think in the last 5 years, there's been a lot of what weren't traditional buyers of our businesses in our industry. And now we're seeing, you know, when Leslie's bought us, they were private equity. I think when they bought Jeff, they were already publicly traded, correct?
correct. Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know what that really probably that I don't know how much difference that makes. I mean, the due diligence that they did and the due diligence they put us through was excruciating. So I'm sure it couldn't have been any, you know, but some buyers aren't that excruciating either. But there's so many different outside buyer options now, back fueled by private equity, quite honestly.
Yeah,
And that
actually,
wasn't the case when we were seeing consolidation and distribution, some manufacturing, but we weren't seeing really a lot of huge consolidation on the hot tub retailer side. Were we, Jeff? Did I forget that?
No, we weren't.
so
No,
that actually kind of leads into a question that we have. Is they asked if we believe future buyouts in our industry will come from outside buyers or from consolidation within the industry. I mean, none of us have a crystal ball, but I think we're seeing a little bit of both still. Just on it's not quite as you know, there's not as much a fervor as there was maybe back during the pandemic. There's kind of a boom there of acquisitions, like you mentioned, but I think we're still seeing a little bit of both now. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Jeff?
Yeah, no, I would say that yes, you are still seeing that. What I seem to see out there is now the bigger companies buying bigger companies. You know, Watkins Wellness acquiring Finleo. You have a lot of different. I see Bullfrog opening corporate stores. You know, which
Well, and when you talk about bigger companies buying bigger companies, I mean, we saw like Watson's bought, you know, Rec Warehouse down in Florida. So I think you're seeing some of those where people who have bigger businesses in different markets are looking to expand in markets, and instead of doing it on their own, they're finding those established businesses that can be a good fit. So, so yeah, I don't think it's going to stop.
Yeah, no, I don't either, but I think the frenzy we saw, and there is something in common with all those purchases, and they are that common thread is well-run businesses. Okay. I do know that people have looked to buy businesses and walked away from it because the businesses that you would think would be really clean and really sharp aren't. There's other people that have sold businesses and you know, their books, I can't emphasize that enough. Your books have got to be legit. They have got to, like, they don't fool around when it comes to looking at your financials. There's a lot of time and scrutiny on that.
Yeah. You can kind of skirt by.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's right. You can kind of skirt by some of that stuff when you're selling to a family member or when you're selling to an employee. You know, it's a little bit of a handshake deal. You know, the research that you do beforehand is not nearly as intense. And that's what a lot of what we've talked about so far has been. We haven't talked to anyone who has gone through the process of having a business come in and do the kind of like come in with an M&A team, right? And have sort of a process that they go through and a test that you're there, you know, you guys kind of have to run through everything. So I'm curious what, you know, what that was like. Because like you said, your books have to be in order in a way that's completely different from, if you're selling to an employee or to a family member.
I don't know if I agree with that. I
Really?
think other than the fact that with a related party sale, there's certain things that you can comfortably sort of add back to earnings and
Sure.
say, okay, yeah, that's here, that's there. A big buyer is going to not be too many of those add backs is just going to they're going to get real edgy about all the add backs. And so the goal going into a transaction with a larger buyer is that your financials need to be clean. They need to really, it's not like, oh yeah, but I'm paying myself more rent than market and we're running that through as rent. Then suddenly you have to sit down and recast that. And you don't want to do that when the big buyer is sort of looking over your shoulder. So you need to be running year over year financials that have minimum, if any, sort of what I'd call recastable add back items. That's what you mean, Jeff, right? And um, so that's a baseline. And so as far as a related party, yeah, you just don't have to. You can still be a little squishy on that, but I think even on a related party, potentially to include even a family member. It, I think it needs to be, on of any sizable transaction or not, still needs to be done correctly.
Sure.
And you're not going to go through the due diligence extremes of corporate America, particularly the quality of earnings study, and then all the schedules of everything that you have to provide. Even though I bet you have to do a little bit of that, even in a smaller, less corporate sale. So, but the financials are a baseline. You can't, and that I think you got to start 3 to 5 years in advance of getting your financials clean like that. Do you agree, Jeff? You probably did it at your transaction, and therefore you were already doing that stuff by the book.
That's exactly right. Like that's where I have to give the any kind of trade groups you can be involved with. I was and I was involved with Gemini. You were involved with what was the group that you?
It was Vistage. So it
Yeah.
was more. It wasn't an industry specific, other than Jacuzzi had like a strategic dealer group, but not like Gemini.
Yeah, but even the Vistage, you're hanging around like-minded people that are doing
Absolutely.
things right, and that's where it goes back to, and getting back to that when you sell to a family, it's a different avenue because you're still in the business, and I don't say this without any, I don't with any malice or anything like it, but I like being out of the business. Like I like that it doesn't matter how the store's doing. I put my staff in a really good place when I sold the business. They're in better hands than they were with me. It's different. I'd be the first to admit, yeah, it's not. That's what they say. Oh, it's different. It's different. Well, of course it's different. It's a different company that owns you guys. On the flip side of that, it's really been nice to walk away. And I think Brian knows exactly what I'm talking about. Whereas when there's transaction with friends or key people or family, you're kind of still in it. And especially that was one of the negatives to me about an ESOP was that you're still kind of in the business for a little bit. You're still you have a very vested interest to see that business succeed. So not that I don't, I really do want to see Spring Dance succeed, and it is. It's getting along. So it's it's just a matter of change that they're all going through.
I think that kind of goes back to something we've talked about a lot as we've done this series is kind of where you have to start when you are looking at selling your business is what do you as the seller want your life ultimately to look like once that deal is signed, determining what you actually need to live the life that you want. And yeah, part of that too is, do I want to still have any involvement in the business at all, either from a operational standpoint or just from a financial standpoint where its success is still my success. That's those are big things that you kind of need to have your mind wrapped around before you start down any path with any seriousness.
It's like a flow chart, and you're right. I agree. Jeff and I are very different sellers because he sought it and it sort of landed in my lap. We happened to both be ready. Timing was really good. Didn't know when that opportunity would present itself, if it would present itself again. But there's something in me that sounds odd, but wishes I still had an office down in the building I own. That and I have I mean, I have a lot of stuff to keep me busy. And part of that is because you have to replace what you do 60, 70 hours a week with something. I haven't found a good bar yet to hang out that much in. But I do wish there still was some opportunity to just put these various tools that you sort of haphazardly accumulated over your career to work. And like Jeff said, we were pretty good at what we did. So to think that I was going to sell this and go do something else, that would just have been more headaches, right? Starting another business, really? Why would you do that?
Yeah.
So how did you guys land on what the value of your business was? I mean, how was that? Did they have you go through a valuation process and they kind of said, this is what we're willing to pay? Or did you guys say, here's my number. Can you beat it? I mean, what was that like?
Hey, Brian, do you mind if I go first on this?
Please.
Here's the thing that's kind of a funny scenario. You have all these very bright people in a room doing the Gemini program, and there's this frenzy. Brian sold, and then after Brian sold, Sue sold, right? Brian, am I saying that right?
Yeah. And then suddenly Rich sold. Right. Then it kept going, man. Right.
Sold, and then Jeff Bailey sold, and so you're doing all this. Now, I tend to be I tend to listen a lot to people that I really respect and have mentored me over the years. Some of them don't even know they've been a mentor to me because but they have been, because I've taken a lot of what they said very seriously. So I'm just kind of watching and thinking of all the things I heard. So in my case, I'm listening to a group of people that are talking about, oh, your business valuation, that's what you got to get done first. You got to do this. But in the back of my head, I kept thinking of something Steve Hammock told me years ago, that all businesses are for sale, and the person that your business is worth what a person's going to pay for it. Okay. And of course, we don't have much history in our businesses selling our businesses. So you don't have this ability where you can go to somebody who's essentially you're paying to blow a little smoke to tell you, what your business is worth, which is very, very, it's speculative. How would you describe, like, there's nothing hard to put it against, to say this is exactly what your business is worth and it will sell for this dollar.
It comes down to when the guy's across from you ready to write the check, right? That's at that point what your business is worth.
So when many people were running to get their business appraised, which could take months to a year, I simply called them and wanted to get their offer. I just kept my mouth shut and I gave them everything they asked for. And unlike what you had said, there was no process of us coming together to come up with an evaluation. In fact, mine was a 2-part close. In my case, I don't know if I'm allowed to say, I'm not using numbers, but basically we sat down and the numbers didn't work, and we sat down 2 weeks later and they did. So that's how I would say that you go about with a group like that, because you never know how motivated that person on the other side of the table is to buy your business. And it was out of complete respect that I said no. It wasn't something that I felt like, oh, they weren't being fair. They were being incredibly fair. But when you do the math on what you need at 52 to retire, you have a number that you need to be at. And I wasn't there, but you know, and man, I just enjoyed that process so much working with the acquisition team. They were just wonderful people at Leslie's.
Okay.
And so that was a really big deal. So when that came back, so basically why everybody was running to, and there's all sorts of things. You can Google what's a specialty retailer worth, and it will tell you 10 to 12 times EBITDA. And that's just not true. It's just not true. And so I know you can push your EBITDA up in an ESOP. That's one of the advantages of an ESOP. But again, it just comes to a number. And I learned that from my former partner. He had a number he was waiting on to sell to me, and he got that number, and that all worked out. So so as far as Leslie's helping you along the way to say, hey, this is how we're going to evaluate it, there was none of that.
Okay. I mean, I think that kind of goes back to what we were talking about a minute ago. It's like you have to look at what you need, like you said, at 52 to live the rest of your life the way that you want. And I think it was Sue Rogers who was talking about that she looked at what she needed for retirement, and then she went and made her business that value, like that's, so like you can do it that way where it's like, this is what I need. Is my business worth that now? No, but I'm going to make it that, and that's kind of what she did and how she got to where she was at in a way. I'm putting words in her mouth a little bit, but that was
No, but Sue's very deliberate. Everything she did was very deliberate in her exit, related to her exit, for sure, from the day one.
Yeah. So was that the same for you, Brian? Like that you kind of had your number and it was like, let's see if you can get there?
I mean, over the years, I had a 35% business partner, the Carlsons, and as we sort of investigated these how do you play out these internal transactions, we went through various exercises of evaluation, and we had the business valued on a few occasions by an outside firm. My CEO group, we talked a lot about valuations and multiples and EBITDA and whatever else. And then so ultimately we had a long enough, the good news is we had a long enough runway to focus on some things that would increase enterprise value. Just bottom line, make money. And the more money you make, the more your business is going to be worth in the right situation by X times EBITDA or X times earnings. So we knew what the number, sort of what it was that it needed to be to feel like it was a transaction that I'd want to be to further. And their initial number was light, like perhaps Jeff's was, and it was a range with a range not explained. Like when you give a range of like 25%, can you tell me what that, well, like, that's not a number. That's not a number. So it took us several months actually to get to a number. And it was, they had to stretch, and it versus what Jeff got 3 years later, hard to even compare because the timing was different. This multiples swing with certain things, right? But then just to not to elaborate any longer, but then we had the number. And then you take the number net of what your estimated tax liability is going to be.
Sure.
And then I have a 35% partner. And I have a 90-year-old mother that owns 22%. And so when you take 35 and 22, that's 57. That leaves me with 43. And so I had to step back from the number. In my case, put a 0.43 multiplier to it. And while I'm quite a bit older than Jeff, was I willing to literally walk away from my income, my future earning potential for this number? And they got the number to basically what I think was an acceptable range. And that number, we got there, and it wasn't a big stretch from what we agreed on originally.
Yeah. Okay.
But if that number was light, if it was 25% lighter than what my net 43% was going to be, I didn't feel like I had the ability to do the deal yet. I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing the deal at that number, and so either the deal wouldn't have happened, or I would have been able to squeeze them like Mr. Bailey a little bit and get more out of it.
Well, you know what though, it really was it was a non-emotional decision. Like you know, everybody kept saying that you can't get emotional, you can't get emotional, and it's like, yeah, it's your whole life that's, you know, that you're talking about right now, and you're doing giant change, so it's hard not to be emotional. But it wasn't emotional, it was a number. This was the number I needed, and it didn't work. And then the second time around, it worked well. So
Yeah.
yep, that's
By the
all.
way, in the case of our buyer, it wasn't emotional at all. It was not emotional at all, right? There was no emotion from them.
No.
They just wanted to get the deal done so they could continue on the journey that they were on.
Yeah. So I know we had another question come in. I mean, obviously, this discussion, we've kind of moved away from, multiples of EBITDA and all of that. But do you guys have a sense or an opinion of what maybe the multiple range is for businesses in our industry right now?
I think it's just it just depends on how the business is run
Yeah.
when it's looked at. I think that's the key. And there's this thing called blue sky that I learned about, which is the difference between that multiple and what a buyer is willing to give on top of that multiple. Meaning, it might make your multiple seem higher, but it was really blue sky. It was something a little extra they were throwing in because in my case, just having a conversation with somebody and said, well, why is it that you guys came back and were so much more generous? And it had nothing to do with me, the company. They had a lot of stores in our market and they wanted to have the best hot tub company in the market. It was that simple, non-emotional. Let's get the biggest hot tub company in the Delaware Valley next to our 27 stores that we have in this market. It's a good business thinking, very good business thinking.
Yeah.
Right place, right time.
Yeah.
Right place, right time. I'd say multiples for transactions of sort of our industry, say revenues, say EBITDA has to be probably over $1 million in order for probably to get really any sort of strategic or private equity partners interest, I would guess. And I would think multiples are in the 5 to 7-ish, but that's dare say that without knowing the sort of the strategic opportunities with a potential buyer. If you are doing something incredibly unique, or if you happen to be the best and the biggest hot tub dealer in the Delaware Valley, and someone wants to own that business because it aligns well with what they're doing, that's going to drive a multiple higher because it's more unique and it's more of that yin fits the yang thing that draws strategic buyers, is what I would say. So multiple is going to be a component of I think strategic uniqueness. I think if you have a financial buyer, multiples in part, how are they paying for it? Are they going to do SBA? Will the SBA accept that valuation in their what's the debt load required? So it's not nothing wrong with an SBA buyer, but I don't know that you're going to drive multiples for a financial buyer that's financing the transaction. Do you agree with that, Jeff?
I sure do. Yes, 100%. Yep.
That doesn't necessarily mean that's not a good way to transition your business to the next quote generation of ownership, but probably not going to get you the maximum dollars.
It was only 3 years before that, when I bought the business in 18, that with the SBA loan, the only thing they were worried about and just would not stop going after cash flow. I mean, that was what they just wanted to know, that everything was the cash flow was there to make the payments. That was their number one thing for the SBA.
How about, I mean, so they didn't test valuation, or it's not like a home appraisal where there's
No,
a
they did their own in there, but they were really
Uh,
they were watching our numbers. It was much more personal to them. And I used I used a small community bank, but it was much more, personal to them. And so they were terrific. And it was a, $2 million transaction, and I
Right.
got an
That's
umbrella when it was done. So
a nice
yeah.
umbrella. Nice. But that's really up to a $5 million, typically about a $5 million transaction with SBA. But again, if we're talking an outside buyer, that's a very important. I mean, that's even how a related party, maybe not a kid, but maybe a kid or an employee could go out and finance the business. But it does require them to have some working capital to come into the business with. So that was a long answer to valuation of multiple.
Yeah, no, but I think you answered it though, as best as you could, because like you said, I mean, there are so many factors. I mean, you
More
guys both.
unique that your niche is in your individual market, the more your business is worth more.
Okay. Yeah. You guys both explained how you ended up with your buyer. But so for people who don't have, kids or employees that they are, looking to, and ESOP doesn't make sense for whatever reason as well. I mean, where would you recommend that those people begin to look for someone from the outside to take a look at their business?
Jeff?
Well, I think this goes back to a little bit of networking, in the sense of listening to what's going on in the market. And there are other, I can think of two people right now, and I know there's additional ones. I can't connect them, but I know of two people that was two different private equity groups that were buying into the hot tub business.
Yep.
And I think you call those people. It was funny when I was on a Lanza trip, and it was a beautiful trip. I think we were in Greece a couple of years ago, and it was right after I had sold, and everybody was boo, but then they all came back. They all came back at some point during the trip and just wanted to talk about how they could sell their business to Leslie's. Not all of them, but very smart people there, good people. And so yeah, that's how I would say that, along the lines of that question, which was what we were talking outside, where they love
How to find.
Yeah. I would say it's not just. I mean, you can go and put your business with a broker, but I mean that's also a really wonky thing, because you can't believe what brokers will tell you what they're going to get for your business, and you're dealing with a whole different animal there. I'm not sure if you dealt with that, Brian, but.
I mean, I know a number of M&A people that sell sort of small to medium size, closely held businesses as brokers. I think if I were to be asked that question, I would say become a student of what's happening in our industry. Learn everything you can about just open the trade journals, right? And Google. If some private equity firm took a position with somebody in our industry, Google it and find out what other stuff they're buying and whatever stuff they're doing. So become a student of what's happening in our business. And I would say try to become a student of what's happening in your local area in terms of business transactions. Again, listing with a broker. There's some brokers that have tried to use our industry specifically, but I guess there's not much of that now currently with Rod Sterling passed away. I don't know who's the prevalent broker in our industry. So I'd say locally, find out from your network of other business owners who sticks out, and if and I don't know. The other problem is also how widely do you cast the word that you're trying to sell your business, with regards to how your team, your coworkers, um, view that and
Sure.
see that. So networking both locally and within the industry, become knowledgeable of what's happening around you, and
Yeah.
and that's what made Jeff pick the phone up.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, I think we are getting press releases all the time of, companies consolidating, of people, private equity coming in and buying them and, rolling people together. I mean, there is still a lot going on. And I think that's really great advice, is to pay attention to that, to who the buyers are, and don't be afraid to reach out and make those contacts. Maybe they're not the right fit for you, but they may know somebody. And I think sometimes as small business owners, we think that, well, no one's knocking on the door, so nobody wants my business. I mean, that's not necessarily true. There are whole, networks of people who want to invest in small businesses, who want to own small businesses, who see that as, their pathway to wealth. And so it's a whole thing. There are definitely people out there. You just have to, like you said, Brian, become a student of what's going on in the market, in our industry, and outside our industry. Do you think that people are, I don't know, do you think people are turned off from our industry by just some of the complexities of it, or not so much? We had a question along those lines of, people just, sort of being our industry being really foreign to them, and them not maybe being interested in it because of some of those things.
Um, I think it's a business that requires active management, and varied opinions on if you can do that virtually or from another geography.
Sure.
I I don't I don't think our business is any more complex than an HVAC company or a good sized plumbing firm or a home remodeler. I think that's I think that when we think our business is overly complex, I think that's a bit of a I think that's a naive statement, personally.
Sure. Yeah. I
Um,
mean, I talk to business owners for a living, and we all think that our businesses are these super special, unique unicorns, and they are to us, right? But when you start to talk to people who've owned many businesses, across multiple industries, you realize pretty quickly
we
that
locked up. I
it's
locked
not.
up.
Uh-oh. Can you still hear me?
Shoot. Oh, hi.
Oh, there we go.
We're back.
Okay. Man, that's
Um,
the first time that's happened on one of these webinars.
that's
We had
weird.
a little technical glitch there.
Um, yeah, not to underestimate the complexity of our business, but any business is complex. And so it's about systems and processes and having clean procedures and having financials that help you manage the business, that make the complexity of the business value that you're going to command. I, yeah, I don't know if I think that's a cop out.
Yeah. Well, do you think that in some of those cases that they just might ask the owner to stick around for a longer amount of time to kind of get the transition
Depends
under?
on the buyer. It
Sure.
really, the answer is absolutely. And I think someone that's sort of trying to maneuver the sale of their business, and if it is indeed to an unrelated or outside buyer, that's a question they need to be really clear with, and in their own head is, do they want to do that? What is the realistic time frame to do that? And even associated with that, dependent upon the buyer, are you also willing to carry some of the um, um, financing forward? That was something that Jeff and I did not have to do. It was a walk away. We had no earn out. There was no variability in the transaction as agreed at the end of a 2-year period or a 3-year period. And that's something else, is that my advisors always told me that if you have an earnout associated with the value of your business, you have to pretty much assume that the known is the agreed upon upfront cash, and the earnout's gravy. And don't make the earnout the deal breaker in terms of your ability to have enough to do whatever you want to do. So deal structure is also so important.
Yeah. So we had an interesting question that just came in. They asked, were there cultural or operational changes by the new owners that surprised you, either in a positive or negative way? And how did you kind of process seeing your business take a different direction, if so?
We locked up again, but in the event that you can hear
I can hear
me,
you.
there was a when payroll got taken over, for example, by I'm not sure where I lost you and where I didn't, but
Right, I could hear you the whole time.
okay, there were definitely changes, and the more that sort of got pulled out of our local office and done by the people in Phoenix, it just changed the internal dynamic. And what Jeff said something that was really relevant. You walk into his business now, his former business now, or my former business now, and the very prevalent comment is, it's so different. Well, even if I got hit by a bus tomorrow and I still own the business, then the following morning it was going to be really different anyway. And if I sold to a key employee or even to a family member, other than the fact that I would be there to sort of help be the stabilizer of culture, there'd be a different, it'd all be different. So and change is hard for human nature, right? It's any change, particularly if it's your job that you've been coming to for all these years. So absolutely, there's a change. And as more stuff is kind of pulled away from a local, depending upon the buyer, a local area, that continues to sort of occur.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it, are you able to, I don't know, be kind of detached from that, or does it make you feel some sort of way when those things happen?
The answer is yes.
Got it.
Both is a pragmatic pull towards what do you expect? You sold the business. You don't have direct control of it. You don't have control over anything, not even direct control. Right. So that's the pragmatic side, and the other side is sometimes it's hard on the people that were a part of our success, and that's the part that you sort of.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, we've got one last question. We'll answer this question, and then we're coming up on time here. But what would you say is the most difficult conversation you had during the sale, whether with the buyer, employee, or family member? And then how did you approach that? These are good questions coming in here at the end.
Yeah, that is a good. The most difficult conversations were with my family. To include my son-in-law, who was in the business, and my daughter, who had been in the business with the intent to come back into the business, sort of post a certain amount of children, right? This deal presented itself at a time where I didn't feel like I could park it and revisit it in a year or two or three or four. And so the decision was made to go forward, and my family supported me. But it was, I changed what they saw as their trajectory a little bit, particularly the ones that maybe had a sense that they were going to be involved down the road.
Yeah. Well, Mike Dunn brought in one last question, which was really close to the question I was going to ask last, is, now that you're retired, how do you feel on Sunday evenings? And my question was going to be, what does life look like now that you've sold the business and have retired?
Well, it's been, thanks for the question, Mike. It's been 2.5 years since I left the business, and 5.5 years since I sold the business. So, and I'm not as young as Jeff Bailey was. Sunday nights are the same as any night now. Coming home from vacations, I just took the longest vacation away from. By the way, you take a vacation from retirement, I've got to sort of put that together, right? But what you're doing is you're changing your scenery. And we were gone no one got the mail for 3 weeks. How's that? And I'd never been gone that long before. And I'm not ready to be gone for months at a time, but it's come home and there's nothing, no embers from a fire that burned, God forbid, no, it took a while, but there's no stress or angst that isn't brought on by something that I did well outside of work.
Yeah. Well, Brian, thank you so much for doing this today. I appreciate it. And thanks, Jeff. We lost you there towards the end, but we got you for the meat of it. So
it was fun. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming on today. Feel free to use that promo code loyalty to sign up for our in-person workshop in Dallas. And I hope to see some of you there. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Bye.
Bye.